So last night I was lucky enough to catch an advanced screening of Alien Romulus. This is the 7th entry into the Alien canon, and this entry is directed by Fede Alvarez. Fede Alvarez, you might recall, directed the Don't Breathe film. He also is probably most well known for his work on the Evil Dead sort of reboot type deal, whatever it was. I think what this film shows is Fede is really great at playing in somebody else's sandbox, because what he essentially does is he sort of takes these hallmarks and things that you expect from an Alien film that, you know, if you watch Alien 1 and Alien 2, you would expect, and sort of building that into his own sort of narrative that replicates those things and sort of updates them for current generations. Whereas the first film was Space Truckers, this film is essentially Space Millennials. This film has a group of 20-somethings who are stranded on a mining planet by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation in sort of this indentured servitude. I really love this piece of world building because what we get into is the fact that they basically work on this planet for so many hours, and after so many thousand hours they get their freedom and then go to another planet. The film really centers on this woman, Rain, played by Kaylee Spaney, who is sort of stuck on this world after her parents died and left into care of her android sort of brother, played here by David Jackson, in a role that, like, I just didn't expect. But I literally, he has a little bit of a stutter. He's clumsy. He was a discarded mining android that her dad fixed up and then sort of left her in his charge. And she considers him a brother. And, you know, it's this sort of familial bond that sort of helps imbue this film with a heart that I wasn't expecting. And that's the one thing a lot of the Alien films, I think, in the last 30 years have missed, is the fact that these films, they work because they have the horror and they have the space and they have this great visual style, but they have the humanity and this heart that sort of keeps the audience vested. So it's basically this young woman and her brother, who are then recruited by this other group of 20-somethings who have decided they're just going to jump the planet. But to do so, they need cryotubes. Where can they find cryotubes? Well, there just happens to be a derelict spaceship in the atmosphere with cryotubes on it called the Romulus. Now you can see where we're going here, because apparently this wasn't a derelict spaceship, but it was a derelict space station. They were experimenting on xenomorphs. I don't want to spoil where they find their xenomorphs from, but it's kind of a fun sort of tie into the bigger Alien picture. But the horror is there. It's very, like, visceral, lots of good jump scares. Fede is good in the horrorscape. This film definitely has that. And then, like, you have the human story, because you have one of these 20-somethings is pregnant. There's a couple here, and there's also Rain and her brother, who is not well liked because apparently there was a recent accident on the mining planet where, in order to save 20 people, where the android had to kill 3, and one of them being the parent of one of the people on this sort of expedition onto Romulus. So you have all that going on. And there's a lot of interpersonal sort of drama and tension, and you also have these really interesting relationships among the space millennials, so to speak. Eventually, Xenomorph comes into play, and stuff goes sideways, as you would expect. And this is where Fede really shows his chops in the horror genre. And the film goes to some really interesting places. It's got the gore you'd expect. It's got some of the set pieces that you'd expect. There's a lot of practical effects here. And the film does something in its third act that I don't think a lot of people are ready for. Most of the Aliens tend to go for this big third act, bizarre set piece. And Fede Alvarez is right at home here, delivering an insane third act that I was not personally prepared for. Now, as a fan of these series, I've gotten used to apologizing for them. Aliens was the thing that kind of sold me onto the franchise. Alien I discovered later, but those were Alien films for me. And it wasn't until 10 years later that we got Alien 3. And then the apology started, because these films, even though they had xenomorphs and they had these great sort of people helming them, they just never were able to capture that spirit for some reason of the first 2 films. Cameron was a master at sort of coming in, taking over, and doing his thing. And Aliens is like the high bar of all sequels till the end of time, essentially. And then you have Alien 4, you have Alien Resurrection, you have Aliens vs. Predator, and it's just nobody seemed to realize what made those first 2 films so good. Not even Ridley Scott, because when he came back for Prometheus and Alien Covenant, they just were missing that thing, that humanity, that heart. And, you know, I think Fede did his homework, And what he did is he did a back to basics approach, taking in the first two films and not doing like a Force Awakens type thing where it's not full of nostalgia. Nostalgia's kind of bringing you into this. It's the story, it's the characters, it's the scares, it's everything you want. And that's what makes this film so great, is I don't have to apologize to the people who see it and be like, well, it's an alien film. It's not that great, but it's got some good ideas. No. Romulus is a good film, start to finish. It's solid. It's got the scares. It's got the humanity. It's got everything an Alien fan could want, and it completes it into a holy trinity of films. Alien, Alien Romulus, and Aliens make up a trilogy that these films have always deserved. So, in my opinion, if you're an old Alien fan, this is what you've been waiting 30 years for. This is what I've been waiting 30 years for, to be honest. I felt watching that film like I was watching Aliens for the first time. And I was just in pure awe of what Fede had done with this. It's the same thing with Evil Dead. He was able to capture perfectly what made the Evil Dead is, update it to modern sensibilities, and then deliver it to a new audience. And that's what Alien Romulus is. It is perfect as far as I'm concerned. 10 out of 10. It's the best Alien film I've seen since Aliens. And, you know, see it before somebody spoils it for you. That's all I'm going to say.